Hi everyone. I am ready to review the topic 13 practice test with you that was in your book that you did last week, or possibly the beginning of this week. It's the one with the pages that are red on the side. It starts on page 727. I apologize that I didn't get this video posted earlier. Pearson kept having an error and I couldn't get in to see the practice test to review it with you guys. But that's okay. I'm here in my pajamas. And maybe you've been learning in your pajamas, so we'll have a little math pajama party. If you are viewing this in the morning, good morning. What I would like you to do is to watch the video and review your math practice test. And then if you're ready, you can get on to Pearson Realize and take your topic 13 online math test. If you are not quite ready, I'm going to leave the test open until Sunday night. So you can take it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. If you have any questions, please let me know if it's not working. If you're not able to get onto the internet on those days, please let me know. I'm more than willing to be flexible, and I can speak to your parents about when it needs to be posted for you, or if you need me to send you an online copy or something. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start on page 727. Please make sure that you have your math book or you have the practice test with you and something to use to correct it. So a colored pencil, crayon, marker, pen, just that way you can take note of what the right answer is just in case you had a little trouble on it. So once again, I have the practice test pulled up on my computer. So if you see me looking at things, I'm just looking at the practice test. All right, number 1, 3 friends work on a project. Cindy does 4/8 of the project. Kim does 3/8 of the project. Sandy does 1/8 of the project. How much of the project do they complete all together? So if we look at this and we circle the things that are important, right? That's the first thing that we should be doing. We should be circling 4/8, 3/8, 1/8, and then all together. So it is also important in the first sentence that they're working on a project together. So this means that we're comparing fractions that are coming out of the same whole, right? It's the same project. So because all of these fractions have 8 as the denominator, we know that we can compare them using the numerator. So since they want us to do all together, we know from 2nd grade and 1st grade that all together means adding. So to add these fractions, they're just chunks of a whole. So we're going to pretend like we have fraction strips. So if we have 4 pieces, right, of a 1/8 fraction strip, and then we add 3 more on, well, 4 strips plus 3 more strips would give us 7 strips. Then Sandy does 1/8. So now we need to add 1 more strip onto it. 7 plus 1 is 8. And if the denominator is 8, our fraction is now 8/8, or 8/8. Now, if they did 8/8 all together, we know that that means they did 1 whole. So they did the whole project together. All right, number 2. Serena can compare 3/4 to 3/6 without using fraction strips. She says that a whole divided into 6 equal parts will have smaller parts than the same whole divided into 4 equal parts. 3 smaller parts must be less than 3 larger parts. So 3/6 is less than 3/4. Is Serena correct? Choose the best answer. Okay. So this goes along with what we talked about when you're sharing with more people, your piece is going to be smaller. So if I'm sharing a cake with 1 person, then there are only 2 people having a piece, and our pieces are going to be quite large. If I'm sharing a cake with 10 people, well, now we're chopping it into 11 pieces, and my piece is going to be quite small. So what she's saying about the pieces and how their size would relate, she is correct. So she's saying if you had 3 of the larger parts, which would come out of 3/4, or if she has 3 of the smaller parts, which would be the 3/6, that her fraction would be bigger if it was 3/4. So is she correct that 3/6 is less than 3/4? The answer is A. Yes, she is correct. If you had trouble with that, another way to think about it is with benchmark fractions or benchmark numbers. So if you think about it, 3/6 is the same thing as 1/2. So if we have a number line with 0 here and 1 here, 1/2 would be in the middle, and 3/4 would be just to the side of it, right? Because 1/2 is also the same thing as 2/4. So if 2/4 is here, 3/4 is here, and 4/4 or 1/2 is here. Well, 3/4 is closer to 1 than 2/4 is. So we also know that 3/4 is a bigger benchmark fraction. Okay, number 3. Jill finished reading 2/3 of a book for a summer reading project. Owen read 2/8 of the same book. Who read more of the book? So Jill read 2/3, that's important, so you can circle that. He read 2/8, that's important, so you could circle that. And then we need to see that what is the size of the whole? Well, it says they read the same book, so the whole is the same size. So who read more? We can compare because they both read the same book. So what we're going to do is we're going to circle on the number line the fraction that each of them read. So Jill read 2/3, so you're going to circle 2/3 on the top number line. On the bottom number line, Owen read 2/8, so you're going to circle 2/8. So if 2/8 is over here and 2/3 is over here, we know that the person who read the most is the person who's closer to 1. So 2/3 is closer to 1 than 2/8 is. So we then look back in the word problem to see who read 2/3, and that was Jill. So our answer would be, that Jill read more of the book. Number 4, there is 1/4 of a pear in every container of fruit salad. Show the number of pears in 8 containers using a fraction. Okay, so we know that if the unit fraction is 1/4 and we have 8 of them, we can do 1/4 plus 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 1/4. Ooh, that was a lot of things to say. Or we know that we can do 1/4 times 8, which would tell us that 1 times 8 is 8. And so then we can put it over the 4 and know that our answer would be 8/4. Now, if the 1 times 8 confused you, you don't have to do that. You can add them up. And we know that 1 plus 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 1 equals 8. And 8/4 is how many pairs that she would have. Now, it said to use a fraction, so you do need to have 8/4. If you wrote 2 whole pairs, that answer is correct, but just remember you would get some points off because they asked for a fraction. So make sure you put 8/4, even though it's the same thing as 2 whole pairs. Okay, number 5. During the time allowed, Della swam 3/6 of the length of the pool. Lauren swam 4/6 of it. Write the correct symbol to compare the fractions. So they gave us fraction strips for this one. So the top row is Della because there are 3 1/6 pieces, and we know that equals 3/6. Lauren's is the second strip because we know that 4 of the 1/6 pieces equals 4/6. And so which one is closer to 1 whole? That would be the bottom one, which is Lauren. So we know that 4/6 is greater than 3/6. So because we know that the alligator sign, right, eats the big number, the alligator mouth needs to be opening towards the 4/6. So it's pointing towards the 3/6 and it's eating the 4/6. Okay? So the answer should be 3/6 as less than 4/6. Okay? All right. And remember, if you have any questions on that, on the symbols, the alligator always eats the big number. And you can always say it out loud to yourself to see if it's correct. So if I said 3/6 is greater than 4/6, I might stop and think, that doesn't sound right. Let me look at my symbol again. And then you would realize where your mistake was. All right, we are now on page 728. Number 6, Mark and Sydney each have a piece of wood that is the same size. Mark paints 2/8 of his piece of wood. Sydney paints 5/8 of her piece of wood. Who painted a fraction that is closer to 1 than to 0? So if you can do this one in your head, great. If you need to use a picture or do a little sketch, that's totally fine. you just do it on the side. When you're doing your test online, obviously there's no margins for you to make your little sketches or do your work. So feel free to grab a piece of scratch paper and do your work on the side. That's totally fine. So if he paints 2/8 of his pieces of wood, that means on a number line, if here is 0, that 2/8 would be right about here, right? We go 1/8, 2/8. Sydney paints 5/8. So we would go from 0, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. So if Sydney's over here and Mark was over here, Sydney's is closer to 1 than to 0. And so the answer would be Sydney. Number 7, Bart practiced piano for 2/3 of an hour. Ruthie practiced for 2/4 of an hour. Which comparisons are true? Choose all that apply. Now remember, for a choose all that apply, it might be more than one answer. Not always, but it might be. So we need to go through them one at a time and not race through and think, ooh, it should just be one answer and then I'm going to leave. So 2/3 is less. I almost read the symbol wrong. 2/3 is less than 2/4. Well, if we're using benchmark fractions, we know that 2/3 is closer to 1 than it is to 0. And we know that 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. Well, if 1/2 is in the middle, 2/3 has to be bigger. So the first option is not true. The second option says 2/4 is greater than 2/3. Well, if we just knew that number 1 was wrong, number 2 can't be right either because it's saying the same thing just in a different order. The third one says 2/3 is greater than 2/4. Well, we said that that was true because 2/3 is closer to 1 than 2/4 is, so we should color in the third box. Okay, the fourth choice, 2/3 is equal to 2/4. We know that cannot be true because unless they have the same numerator and denominator, or they are equivalent fractions, that we cannot use the equal sign. And so because they have the same numerator but different denominators, they're not equivalent and they are not the same. So we do not fill in that box. The fifth choice says 2/4 is less than 2/3. Well, that's the opposite of what we colored in on the third choice. So the fifth choice is also correct. So you should have filled in the bubble for the third choice and for the fifth choice. Number 8, Greg colored the fraction model below. Which fractions name the purple part of the model? Choose all that apply. So the purple part is important. You should circle that or underline it because we need to make sure that we're counting the right thing. If we start counting the orange, we're going to get the wrong answer even though we knew what to do. So if we look up at the top, we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total pieces. We can see then that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them are purple. So right away, we know that 6 out of the 8 are purple. So we know that 6/8 is a correct choice. Now what we need to do is we need to look at the other options to see which of them are equivalent to 6/8. 1/2. Well, we can see right away from the picture that half of the boxes are not purple. More than half are purple. So it can't be the first choice. 2/3. Well, let's look at that. 2/3, and we're trying to figure out if it's equivalent to 6/8. If we know that we get from 2 to 6 by multiplying by 3, whatever we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom, right? Equal actions for equal fractions. So if we do 2 times 3 to get 6, we would have to do 3 times 3 to get 9. But since the fraction we're trying to get to is 6/8, we know that 6/9 is not the right answer. So it cannot be 2/3. Okay, let's look at the next one, 3/4. If we get from 3 to 6 by multiplying by 2, we can then do that same thing to the bottom. So equal actions for equal fractions. 3 times 2 is 6. Yes, that's correct. 4 times 2 is 8. Yes, that is correct. So 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. So you can color in the box for 3/4. Now let's look at 4/6. Well, how can we get from 4 to 6 with multiplication with a whole number? Not a fraction, not a decimal, and we can't. So all the way we know 4/6 is not correct. We also know that 4/6 is equivalent to 2/3. So if 2/3 was incorrect, 4/6 cannot be correct. So we know that the only two choices are 3/4 and 6/8. Number 9, 2 students each bought a school lunch. Yoon ate 2/3 of her sandwich. Ed ate 3/3 of his sandwich, which is a true comparison. Well, we can look at the picture and we see that there are 2 1/3 strips for Yoon and 3 1/3 strips for Ed. We can also see that the 1 strip and the 3 1/3 are the same thing. So Ed ate all of his sandwich. So we know that Ed's number, 3/3, should be greater than 2/3 because he ate his whole sandwich and she did not. So the only one that shows that 3/3 is bigger than 2/3 is answer C. 2/3 is less than 3/3. Number 10, Carl and Jen shared some large sandwiches that were the same size and cut into 8s. Carl ate 7/8 sandwich and Jen ate 6/8 sandwich. Who ate more? Explain. Well, we know that when the denominators are the same, that we can compare the numerators, and whichever numerator is bigger, that's going to be the bigger fraction. So we look and we see that 8 is the denominator for both of those. So we know that we can compare the numerators. And since 7 is bigger than 6, Carl ate more of his sandwich than Jen. So it says who ate more, and we should write Carl, but then it says explain. So remember, when we're writing an answer to a math sentence or math question, we need to write it in a complete sentence and make sure and use explain. And the easiest way to do that is when we use the word because. So my answer might say Carl because the denominators are the same, so I compared the numerators, and 7 is greater than 6. So 7/8 is greater than 6/8. It's okay if yours is not exactly the same as mine, but you do have to have Carl. You do need to have a reason, so Carl because, and then you need to explain how you solved it. As long as your explanation is correct, your answer is fine. It does not have to be exactly the same as mine. So what I'm going to do right now is turn my page. Okay, we are now on page 729. Just move a couple things out of the way. Okay. Number 11, George wants to know if 2 pieces of wire are the same length. One wire is 6/8 of a foot. The other is 3/4 of a foot. Complete the fractions on the number line to show they are the same length. So we know that when we label a number line, we know that we have to count the chunks, and that's what number should be on the bottom. Well, they already told us that one of them is going to have 4ths and one of them is going to have 8ths. So if we look on the bottom, we can see that that's already started for us with 8ths, right? 8 is on the bottom. So if we start from the left, we have 0, then 1/8. Then we have to fill in the next one, which would be 2/8. They gave us 3/8. You should write in 4/8. They gave us 5/8. You should write in 6/8. They gave us 7/8, and then 1. On the top, we then know that we're dividing it into 4ths. We can also see that there is 0, and then 1 chunk, 2 chunks, 3 chunks, and 1. So we know that then we need to have 4 on the bottom. So if we start on the far left, it's 0. Our first box above the number line would be 1/4. The next one would be 2/4, and the next one would be 3/4. And because we're showing that they're the same length, you can see that 2/4 is in fact above 4/8, which means that they are equivalent. Number 12, Leslie hiked 3/8 of a mile on Monday. On Wednesday, she hiked 3/6 of a mile. She hiked 3/4 of a mile on Friday. Use benchmark numbers to find which day Leslie hiked the farthest. So let's just do this one day at a time. So if we draw a number line and we have 0 on one side and 1 on the other, if we find the fraction that is in the middle, the 1/2 fraction, we would know that that is 4/8. So if 3/8 is what she hiked, that is going to be less than 1/2, and so it's closer to 0. Now let's look at Wednesday. 3/6 of a mile. Well, we know that if 0 is here and 6/6 is over here, 3/6 is in the middle, which means it's equivalent to 1/2. So on Monday, she was closer to 0. On Wednesday, she was right in the middle. And on Friday, she hiked 3/4. So if 0 is here and 4/4 is here, 2/4 would be in the middle, making 3/4 closer to 1. And we know that the fraction that is closer to 1 is the one that is the largest. And so 3/4 was done on Friday, and so they want us to know that she hiked the farthest on Friday. So your answer is Friday. Number 13, Jamal spent the day making a painting for his friend. At the end of the day, Jamal finished 1/2 of a painting. If he is able to finish the same amount of a painting each day, what fraction shows the number of paintings Jamal can make in 4 days? Well, if he's painting the same amount every day, we would just need to take 4 of the 1/2 strips. So 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. Well, when the denominator is the same, we can just add up the numerators. So 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3, plus 1 more is 4. So 4/2 is what he can paint, and so the answer is D. If you were following along and know that that's a whole number, we know that we can divide the top number by the bottom number, and so 4 divided by 2 is 2, so it's whole paintings. He finished 2 whole paintings, but the fraction of that is 4/2. So our answer is D. All right, number 14. Megan ate 3/4 of a cookie. Write an equivalent fraction for the amount of cookie Megan did not eat. So this is a very tricky question because there's a hidden question. So they want to know an equivalent fraction for the part that she did not eat. So if she ate 3/4, how much did she not eat? Well, if we have 4 sections of cookie and she ate 1, 2, 3, how many are left? 1 piece. So she left 1/4. But that's not all they asked. They want to know an equivalent fraction to that. So if she did not eat 1/4, you now have to do equal action for equal fraction. So if I have 1/4 and I want to multiply them both by 2, I would do 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. So an answer that would be correct is 2/8. If you wanted to multiply by 3, you would have 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 3 is 12, so your answer would be 3/12. That would also be correct. You could multiply by 10 if you want. 1 times 10 is 10, 4 times 10 is 40, so another correct answer is 10/40. As long as you did the same thing to the top as you did to the bottom, your answer is correct. Number 15, Alejandra brought 2 pies to a potluck dinner. There was 4/6 of the blueberry pie left and 5/6 of the apple pie left. Choose all of the comparisons that are true. Okay, so because they have the same denominator, we can just compare the numerators. We know that the bigger the numerator, the bigger the number is on top, which means the bigger the fraction is. So 5/6 is less than 4/6. Well, is 5 less than 4? No. 4/6 is greater than 5/6. Well, is 4 greater than 5? No. So the first choice is wrong and the second choice is wrong. The third choice says 4/6 is smaller than 5/6. Is 4 smaller than 5? Yes. So the third choice is correct. The fourth choice says 5/6 is greater than 4/6. Well, is 5 greater than 4? Yes, and so the fourth choice is correct. The last choice says 5/6 equals 4/6, and we know that if the numbers have the same denominator, they cannot be equivalent or equal unless the numerators are equal, and 5 does not equal 4. So the only choices that are correct are the third one and the fourth one. All right, last page. You guys are doing a great job. Number 16, write each fraction in the correct location on a number line. Then circle the equivalent fractions shown on the number lines. So if we look at the top number line, okay, we start at 0. We can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks. So therefore, our denominator has to be 4. So if the denominator on the number on the fraction is not 4, it does not belong on that number line. Now, technically, they did not say you had to number every line on the number line, but that's what I would do just so you don't get confused. So they did 0 for us, then it would be 1/4, then 2/4, then 3/4, then 4/4. Now we need to look on the second number line. 0 is over here, 1 is over here. We can count how many chunks there are. There are 6 chunks, so we need to have a denominator of 6. So it's going to go 0, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6. Now, they asked us to find the equivalent fractions. So, when you look to see which ones line up, there are only 2 pairs that line up. So, if you look at where the middle of the line is, in other words, the fractions that are equivalent to 1/2, we have 2/4 and 3/6. So you can circle those together if you want in one big oval because they are equivalent. They're the same. They're actually the same as 1/2. If we look at 1/4, it is not the same as any of them. If we look at 3/4, it is not the same as any of them. But if we make our way all the way over to where 1 is on the number line, we can see that 4/4 is the same thing as 1. Because when the numerator is the same as the denominator, we can see that that's the same thing as 1. Because 4/4 means 4 divided by 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we can see that 4/4 is the same thing as 1. 6/6 is the same thing as 1. And so 4/4 is the same as 6/6. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but Leia is laying down near my feet and she keeps snoring and it's distracting me. All right, number 17. Draw lines to match equivalent fractions. So we need to find the ones that are the same or equivalent. So start with one you know. It doesn't matter which one you start with. Now, remember your lines should not be looking crazy because otherwise it's hard for me to grade. So let's start with one that we know. I like starting with 3/3 because we know that when the number on the top and the number on the bottom are the same, that it equals 1 whole. So if 3/3 equals 1 whole, what other fraction on the other side equals 1 whole? And we can see that that is 4/4, so 3/3 is equivalent to 4/4. Okay, now I know when the number on the top is bigger than the number on the bottom, we can divide the top number by the bottom number to find out the whole number that it is equivalent to. So if we look at 6/3, we know that 6 divided by 3 is 2. So if we look on the other side to find what else is bigger on the top than the bottom, and when you divide them it equals 2, I see that 4/2, the 4 is bigger, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now we only have 2 left. So now let's start with 1/2. That's one that's usually pretty easy for people. Well, let's see. So our choices that are left are 2/3 and 4/8. We know that 2 times nothing can give us 3. That's a full number. So we know that's not going to work. So let's just double check that it works with 4/8 just to make sure we didn't do it incorrectly. So if we look at 1/2, we can say, okay, how do I get from 2 to 4? Well, that would be, how do we get from 2 to 8? And that would be to multiply by 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. Well, equal actions for equal fractions. So what we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 4 is 4. So we know that 1/2 and 4/8 are equivalent. All that leaves us is 4/6 and 2/3. So we might assume that they're equivalent, but it's probably a better idea to just check it quickly. So how would I get from 4 to 2? Well, I know that I can divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So what we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 4/6 and 2/3 are equivalent. So your equivalent fractions are 1/2 to 4/8, 3/3 to 4/4, 4/6 to 2/3, and 6/3 to 4/2. Number 18, for questions 18A through 18D, choose yes or no to tell if the comparison is true. So remember, you have to answer all of these or your answer is not complete. So let's look at, sorry about that, I thought I lost you for a minute. Okay. 18a, 4/6 is greater than 4/8. Well, we know that if the numerator is the same, that we have to look for the denominator. And the less people that we share with, the bigger your pieces are. So if I'm sharing with 6 people total, I'm going to have a bigger piece than if I share with 8 people total. So 4/6 is greater than 4/8. So yes, that is true. I'm drinking my water out of my Osage cup. All right, 18b. 4/8 is greater than 4/4. Well, we know that 4/8 is a fraction. We know that 4/4, because the number on the top and the number on the bottom are the same, we know that's the same as 1 whole. So if I only ate part of something, or I ate a whole something, we know that that cannot be true, that 4/8 is bigger than 4/4. So 18b is no. 18c, 4/4, which we know is the same as 1 whole, is less than 4/6. Well, if I ate 4/6 of something, I only ate part of it. So it would be more if I ate the whole. So 4/4 is not less than 4/6, and so the answer to 18c is no. 18d, 4/8 is less than 4/6. Okay, now this one is a little bit trickier because there's no whole to look at, so we have to compare the fractions. Now, you could use fraction strips, you could draw a number line, you could draw shapes. It doesn't really matter what you choose to do. You can also think to yourself about benchmark numbers. So we should know, hopefully at this point, because we've done it a couple different times, that 4/8 is the same thing as 1/2. So on a number line between 0 and 1, 1/2 is exactly in the middle. If we were looking at 6 chunks, you could even look at the number line on number 16, we know that 3/6 is the one that's in the middle. So 4/6 would be a little bit closer to 1. So if 4/8 is in the middle and 4/6 is a little closer to 1, we know that that is true. 4/8 is less than 4/6. So the answer to 18d is yes. So to review, 18a is yes, 18b is no, 18c is no, 18d is yes. All right, number 19. Eva and Landon, Landon, you're in our math, had the same math homework. Eva finished 2/4 of the homework. Landon finished 4/8 of the homework. Conjecture. Eva and Landon finished the same amount of their homework. Okay. If you watched the reteaching video already, you know that these are just big words to mean little things that you already know. Conjecture just means answer. So pretend that you were looking at someone's math test, okay? Let's say you were the teacher and you were grading it. The conjecture is just their answer. So someone's answer is Eva and Landon finished the same amount of their homework. So now you have to figure out whether their answer or their conjecture is correct or not, okay? Do they get an A or not? So part A wants you to complete the number lines to help justify the conjecture. So justifying just means prove, and the conjecture is their answer. So how are we going to prove that our answer is correct? Well, let's fill in the number lines. They already did them for you. So we can see that the top one matches Eva's homework because it has 4 on the bottom. So if we label it, it goes 0, then 1/4, then 2/4, then 3/4, then 4/4. You might then want to circle 2/4 because that's how much homework she did. Now if we look at Landon's number line, his is done by 8ths. So if we start on 0, we would do 0, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. It's very weird to say. So if we know that Landon did 4/8 of his homework, we could circle the 4/8. Now, if we look at the number lines and the zeros are at the same point and the ones are at the same point, we know then that if a fraction is on the same point on the number line, that they are equivalent. So right now, look at your number lines where you circled 2/4 and where you circled 4/8. And are they on the same point on the number line? They should be. So now we know that they are equivalent fractions. 2/4 and 4/8 are equivalent fractions. They're actually the same as 1/2. So now we need to use our diagram, which is a number line, to justify, which means prove, the conjecture, which is just the answer. So we're going to use our number line to prove our answer is correct. That's all that means. So we could say the number lines are the same size, and because 2/4 is at the same place as the 4/8 on the number line, they are equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions means that they did the same amount of homework. Hopefully you got something similar to that. If your words were a little different than mine, that's okay. But remember, you need to use an explanation about your number line. You shouldn't be talking about shapes. You shouldn't be talking about you saw on the ruler. No. You should be using your number line because that's the diagram that they asked us to use. So, as long as you said something about the number lines being the same size, looking that 2/4 and 4/8 are on the same point of the number line, and that means that they're equivalent or equal, then your answer is correct. And very good job. Number 20, it's the last one. Good job, guys. For each pair of fractions, write the equivalent whole number in the box. So we have 16/4 equals 8/2 equals, and they want us to find the whole number. Well, we know to find the whole number, we take the top number, the numerator, divided by the bottom number, which is the denominator. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So the answer we should write in that box is 4. All right, the next one is 6/3 equals 4/2 equals what whole number? So we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. We have 6 divided by 3 equals 2. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So the whole number we should put in there is 2. All right, the last one, 8/8. Well, 8 divided by 8 equals 1. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. And so the whole number that should go there is 1. If you understood all of these problems and got most of them correct, or at least understood it once I explained it, you're probably ready to take your math test. You can then log on to Pearson Realize, and you will see the math test in your to-do folder. If for some reason you do not see it in your to-do folder, please let me know and I will get on to try to fix it. If you do not think that you are ready yet to take your math test, or if you are not near a device to take your math test, remember that you can work on it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I'm going to turn it off on Sunday night for everyone unless you have contacted me that you need more time. I'll be able to log on and see who hasn't done it, and I'll also reach out to your parents to see if you need my help for anything. So if you have any questions, please email me or message me on Classcraft. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. I miss you a lot, and I will be posting another video soon. Bye, guys.